In a world that seems to never stop, we've been taught that speed is the key. The faster we run, the farther we go. But does running faster really help us get ahead? Or does it just blur the world around us into a stressed out, chaotic frenzy? What if the real secret to success, to clarity and fulfillment is hidden not in speed, but in the balance between speed and stillness? We see evidence of this in many of the high achievers today. Bill Gates, for example, who completely detaches for something he calls Think Week. We have Tim Ferriss, who goes all out, working crazy hours and then completely dropping off the grid for like 10 days at a time. We have Warren Buffett, who is incredibly busy, yet taking significant portions of his day to simply read and think. And the best part is the strategies in this video don't require you to take a week off or hours out of a day. They're little habits designed to help find that elusive balance between going fast, which can be stressful, and going slow, which can be boring. It involves stepping away from the comfort of distractions so that we can truly start listening to our thoughts, to new ideas. And trust me, I get it. It's oddly comforting to watch a movie that we know is terrible than to simply sit through a flight with only our thoughts. Intentional deceleration. You've probably experienced deceleration when you didn't really want to. Have you ever gone to bed and your mind just wouldn't shut off? Yeah, all the time. How about a vacation where most of your time was spent thinking about work? I know you've never done that, but you can probably think of someone who has. This is really important because of something I call thought momentum. Just like when you slam on the brakes, everything inside of the car flies forward. When you go from full out working to a complete stop, everything inside of your mind keeps going, at least for a little bit. And that's why we need small methods to redirect that thought momentum to a slower speed. Here are some of the methods I use to intentionally decelerate throughout my day. Analog. When I want to go fast, I use digital, and when I want to go slow, I use analog. Notice how each one of these keeps you moving to some extent, while at the same time providing another rhythm to match. Analog is the one that I use the most, especially at the beginning and the end of my day, when I'm winding up and when I'm winding down. But I also use it when I'm doing problem solving or creative brainstorming. It's actually really remarkable how well this works and how I can go from full out working to a totally different pace, a much slower, mentally calm rhythm. And if you want to know how I actually use analog like daily, check out this video up here and it'll give you like a full walkthrough of what that looks like. Reading decelerates me because in order to take in new information and to think about it and cogitate on it, you have to slow everything down. Therefore, it creates that different tempo, that slower speed, that slower pace that my brain automatically matches to. Going on a walk can backfire if you're not intentional about noticing your environment. But without a doubt, some of the greatest moments of clarity have come from stepping into that new environment that's free of any input, an environment that doesn't care if I'm there or not. Intentional deceleration leads us into the next step, which is recharging, not escaping. I think we can all agree that stress depletes our emotional and mental energy. So without a way to recharge, burnout is inevitable. Winston Churchill and four-time Prime Minister of England, William Gladstone, knew this better than anyone. And their methods for recharging were different than most. William Gladstone formed leisure time around cutting down trees, huge trees, by hand. In fact, he could be found in the woods more than 1,000 times during his time in office. In similar fashion, Winston Churchill, a generation later, decided that bricklaying would be a suitable pastime for him, although he wasn't particularly good at it. Both of these men chose forms of leisure that revolved around something that they loved, something with little outside input and that tired out the body yet rejuvenated the mind. And the problem for most of us is that today it's so much easier to simply escape. We escape into the world of VR. We escape into our headphones. We escape into a TV show, perhaps finding enjoyment, but not rejuvenating the mind. If these two men needed a hobby to stay balanced, don't we as well? And it doesn't really matter what you choose to do in order to recharge. After all, who thought bricklaying could be a hobby? But whatever you do choose, it does need to fall into these categories. It needs to be something you do because you love it. something with little external stimulation, and something that rejuvenates the mind. And the beauty of this is that it's just for you, so it doesn't matter if someone else thinks that it's boring or unusual. For me, I like to doodle, ride motorcycle, play music, play sports, read, etc. And I almost always set aside a little bit of time before bed to do something like this. Or what I'll do is once or twice a week, I'll take a longer period of time. It's a time when I can detach, and that becomes my complete focus and enjoyment. And above all, remember, don't escape, recharge. And perhaps the foundation that holds all of this together: cultivate silence. In the mid-1900s, a composer named John Cage composed an unusual song. It was called Silent Prayer. Here's the first 3 seconds of it. Yep, it's a total 4 minutes and 33 seconds of nothing but complete silence. Imagine being on an elevator and that song comes over the radio. Needless to say, it wasn't a huge hit, but at its first live performance, Cage made his point, which was there is no such thing as complete silence. We only think it's silence because we don't know how to listen. Silence, sitting and listening. Think about it. Most of our fast-paced world is trying frantically to avoid silence. As the philosopher Zeno observed, what you notice when you stop to listen can make all the difference in the world. That is an advantage that you can gain over a lot of people who will refuse. Now, for some of you, the thought of sitting in silence for a few minutes sounds way more stressful than anything, and I get that. However, I would still encourage you to cultivate this small habit. For the next few days or so, after you wake up, sit somewhere quiet for about 5 minutes and just sit there and listen to what's happening around you. Observe and notice things that you normally tune out. This may be what's happening around you, or this may be your thoughts. Thought itself will not work except in silence. So if we want to think better, we need to practice being silent. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is quiet our mind. But since the mental state is heavily influenced by our environment, it's usually a good idea to start there. Over time, you'll be able to develop a mind that is quiet and calm even when there's noise all around. And this is one of the greatest defenses to a chaotic world around us. And I'm sure you can think of people like this, where it seems like everything is falling apart and everything is going crazy, and you can look to them and they're calm and they're collected and they don't allow themselves to get caught up in that chaos. And that right there is what we're striving for. On a bit of a separate note, if you're interested in learning how to build a second brain that's better at remembering and storing information, check out this video in the center of the screen.